Okay. Ready? Ready? Okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Would you please stand and salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't like standing right in front of the camera. Scott.
Oh. I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Okay, Duncan and Tracy,
Any discussion? All in favor?
did you have a discussion?
No.
Oh, okay, you just prematurely raised your hand.
Okay.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Tammy.
Okay, we have an accolade tonight on behalf of Ken Scarlata, who is in our Google Meet audience. And so I'm going to bore Ken again because I'm going to be sharing the same information I shared at a NIAP meeting, but I just think it's important for the community to realize what an asset we have with Ken and that he received this award. So just going to take the few minutes that I was very pleased to hear that Ken had been selected for NIAP's Technician of the Year Award. This coming April will mark his 20th year with the district as our head mechanic. Since I was here when we hired Ken, I can clearly speak to what an asset he is for our district. With his hard work, integrity, and safety focus for both students and drivers, he has earned the respect of all of his colleagues. And then I'd like to share a little story of a memory. A few years ago, very early in the morning, and I mean very early, Ken met a charter bus at our district to inspect it before it was used to transport our seniors to Boston for their senior trip. He saw safety concerns and deemed the charter bus unsafe. Not wanting the seniors to be late for their itinerary, Ken took a school bus and transported the students to a location on the thruway to meet another charter bus. After he inspected that bus, our students were allowed to board, and that's just the quality of Ken and how serious he takes the students' safety. Many years ago, we worked on and created a very efficient fleet replacement plan, which has served the district well, that we still use. Ken works with 2 mechanics under him attending classes and staying current with new technology. Under Ken's leadership, the district has always received excellent DOT ratings, which previously had not always been the case. And while I don't want to jinx them, the team is currently in line to receive their 7th 100% rating. This is an amazing milestone, and I recognize that does not happen with a commitment, dedication, organization, and time management. When I handed Ken the plaque last month and thanked him, he was, as always, very humble. So on behalf of the board, I want to thank you, Ken, for the commitment you have for Greenville, your colleagues, and most importantly, our students. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken.
He signed in. You think he could say a few words?
Sure.
Ken, say hello.
Unmute yourself.
There you go.
Good evening. Thank you again, Tammy, for the accolades. I really appreciate it. It's been a good run, and I don't think I'm going to give you another 20 years, but we're going to keep on doing what we do, and about all I can say.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank
You
you.
are appreciated.
I just want to say there's a
I just want to say there's a comment.
keep feeding back.
I'm
if you
sorry.
share this
Say again.
If I turn my mic on, it's going to feed back. I don't have to with Google. Okay. So Ken, I wanted you to know
Anthony, you're
that there's
cutting
a
off.
couple of chats that people are congratulating you. Just wanted you to see that in Google Meet.
I see Mr. Mahan. Thank you, Mr. Mahan. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I do appreciate it. It's a team effort between the bus drivers, the administration, and even the school board, because we have to turn the fleet over occasionally. every 10 years, our replacement plan is a very good working thing, and we're going to visit you in October and November and ask for new buses. It's getting to be that time, but it's a great community to work for, and we take a lot of pride in the buses, the way the buses look. I once got a compliment from a DOT inspector that when he goes past Questar and Hudson, out of 10 buses in line, mine looks the best. So I realized then and there that people are watching, and our buses go all over the place. Syracuse, they go to Camp Oswegatchie, and not only do we want them to perform good, we want them to look good too. So me and the guys really work hard at making them look good. So thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Ken. Okay, open forum?
Okay. If anybody would like to speak, if you would hit the raise hand, and then we'll call on you to speak at this time. Let me check my email. Nothing?
There's one, oh, join.
Let me join, yeah. Okay. Duncan, go ahead.
She's there. She signed in.
Who?
Kate.
There goes Kate. Go ahead, Kate.
Hi, good evening, everyone. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Hi, Katie.
Just wanted to bring to the table, we have been conducting some fundraising for the passing of Ronald France, who was my social studies teacher, and back in the day. We've had a lot of commitment from students and alumni and even some staff. We have done 2 separate fundraisers at this point, one that will benefit the Greenville Food Pantry, but we also have a very generous donation that has come in from the class of 2002 that we wanted to look at some memorial options for Mr. France at the school. I know there's been a couple preliminary conversations around this, but we have had some suggestions from the alumni in terms of looking at dedication of a baseball field, a memorial bench, a tree with a plaque. We really want to get some feedback from the school in terms of what we're able to do so we can properly budget it out, because we do have the 2 fundraisers going at this point, but it's a really great community that's come together for this. So we would love to take some next steps on forward motion for a memorial for him.
Okay,
On behalf, I would say thank you that the money is being raised on behalf of Mr. France. I would say that I would ask you to call Daphne with the number. I know that we have a couple of pictures of some possible benches that we can show you for the area, but we can talk about anything else you'd like to talk about at that time too.
Okay, perfect. So I will, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just said, how does that sound?
Oh, it sounds great. It sounds great. I'm happy to connect with Daphne to discuss. We do have approximately $900 right now, and if we have, you know, a goal to meet and everybody is buying in because everyone's very excited to take part in this, we may be able to even get that a little bit higher. So happy to connect with Daphne offline. And thank you so much.
Okay, Kate, I'll give you a call tomorrow. I'll reach out to you by email, and then we can touch base.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kate, maybe you can put the bench at the top of a hill.
Yeah. Snowsuit.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay.
As an aside, if I may, they are also working with the food pantry, and the food pantry is working with the town. There's a couple of rooms in the area where the food pantry is now that was used by the town. And the town will be meeting this week, I think Wednesday. Is that the normal town board meeting? Anyway, one day this week they're meeting. And hopefully they're going to allow the food pantry to assume that space. And the concept, if that goes through, would be to build out that space, put in some heating. Right now it's not heated, but there's heating. It would be relatively easy to do some heating. They'd do some framing, and then perhaps buy a new refrigeration unit for the fresh produce that they hand out. Right now, that they get that the day before, and sometimes have trouble storing it as where they would like to. We'll see how that works out, but they've raised in excess of $5,000 for that part.
That's
So,
great. That's wonderful.
and in talking with people at the food pantry, the likelihood is that if that works out, they will not only do the build out and the purchase of the equipment, but they would put a plaque up naming the room. So, anyway,
Very nice.
and it just shows the Greenville kids. I mean, Mr. Franz touched a lot of kids. I don't know, well, you guys know, but he lived in Furbush, and when the kids found out, the word went through, and they would go by his house and toot their horns all the time. And if he were out in the yard, he'd be waving at them, and he talked to people about how that made him feel. So the kids came together. They had kids in Hawaii doing a roll down the hill in the Hawaiian sand, and kids in Florida doing the same thing in memory of Mr. Franz. So it was a nice tribute.
Very nice.
Okay. Building level teams. You want to turn this over to Peter? Or who's going?
Nope. Okay, we'll turn it over to Mr. Mahan at this time.
Thank you very much. Right now, Mr. H is going to be presenting some slides for all of us to see. And this is the third part in the three-part series that the board has been listening to for the last, now this is the third month. And it's really the culmination of a lot of work. And when I say culmination, I really mean kind of a discussion that takes us to the next steps. The work at the elementary school was done by the elementary building level team, very similar to the work that was done by the middle school and the high school. Before I begin, I just want to say a word of thanks to all of the elementary BLT members, and I'm going to list them by name. We have two parent members, Gina Bolinas and Sarah Mata. Audrey Matat is our support staff member. And then we have 6 teachers and myself, Laura Calvino, Elizabeth Quell, Valerie Capel, Brian Hostash, Margaret Robertson, and Aileen Roth are all of our elementary BLT members and myself. And together we formed the shared decision-making team for the elementary school. And the work that we began this work over the summer, and it was a deep dive into our data, whether it was student achievement data, perceptual data, our demographic data, and then really trying to mine through what are the most important things that we can do that are aligned with the district goals and that are supportive of the CDEP process that Mr. H has been talking to us about. So we want to just take tonight to share with you some of the highlights of that. We have 2 teacher leaders here to talk to some of those items. Both Mrs. Calvino is here and Mrs. Quell is here. And then Mr. Hash and I will take a small portion as well. Okay. Mrs. Calvino?
Unmute. Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting us tonight to share our goals. And just to go over, we each took different parts of this SF plan for our building, and I worked with the ELA group. Our goal is to increase fewer than 50% of students scoring below grade level on the iReady vocabulary and reading comprehension. At the beginning of the year, in September 2020, since we didn't have scores for last year because of the COVID shutdown, we didn't have end of the year scores for last year. So we decided to show increase in skills for this year. So in the September of 2020, we had in most grade levels, around 85% of kids were below grade level with vocabulary and reading comprehension in the iReady. So our goal is that fewer than 50% will be at that level in the June iReady. So what do we think are root causes? We think gaps in ELA skills definitely are they're accentuated by the time that we spent outside of school in March through June. And then on top of that, the regular summer slides. So we knew that that COVID had a lot to do with some gaps in our ELA skills coming in September. In the past, we've had inconsistent use of our Tier 1 reading and writing programs, in that there were different programs happening and not with fidelity, that we haven't had not adequate time provided to focus on implementing the consistent reading and writing program, and insufficient time for special ed and general ed and AIS to collaborate on program effectiveness and reflect. We know that we feel like our students don't view themselves as readers and writers, and that they see it as a job that they do in school and not as who they are as a person. And that there are gaps and inconsistencies in our phonics instruction, and we know there's a need for more diagnostic assessment and instruction for our struggling readers. So our action steps for this year were some of the things that we're already planning to implement as part of our BLT. That being implementation of, there's an implementation plan for our Lucy Calkins units of study for writing, reading, and we don't have phonics on here, but we have a plan for the phonics as well. This year we have most grade levels, third, fourth, I think are doing 3 units of, no, fourth and fifth are doing 3 units of study for writing, and the rest of the grade levels are doing 4 units of study for writing. Every grade level is doing 3 units of study for reading. So that is the first time that all grade levels are doing those units of study for reading. And we have kindergarten rolling out the phonics units of study this year. We have put in time, thank you to the school for giving us some time to reflect and refine implementation of the workshop model, and that was done in January, and we're hoping to get more time to be able to do that. We would like to see, and we've asked teachers since the beginning of the year to do a read aloud every day for at least 20 minutes at a listening level of 2 grades or above the student's current reading level, and that is to improve their vocabulary. Let's see what else, sorry. Oh, okay, and we also, from that, we wanted to have the teams compile a list of interactive read alouds that they are doing at a grade level so that they're not repeated year after year, and that we see that there's a breadth of genres that are being introduced to students each year. And some of that work will go into the summer. Some other things that we are doing are asking teachers to reflect on their higher order questioning, and also making sure that they have student writing on display in the classroom so that the children see their own work up on the walls, and that they feel connected in that way. So, see, I think that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Calvino. We're going to next move on to the math goal.
Jay,
Actually, Johanna, I'm sorry if I could
Go ahead,
ask a couple of questions on the last slide. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Calvino, for walking through that. That's very helpful. So I believe I heard you say that you didn't have iReady data from last year due to the circumstances. I think that iReady was in place for a couple of years before that, right?
Yes, it was.
So looking through do you know off the top of your head how the below grade level percentage that you see this year in September compares to those prior years?
It's not, it wasn't too off. It was like in the high 70% where kids were below grade level.
Okay.
So now it's like in the mid 80s. It was
Right.
somewhere in a similar range, yes.
Okay. And in the past, if you start out, say, in a similar range, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, how much improvement do you typically see? Is it 30 basis points or is it less?
It was about 30.
So that's an achievable goal based on past experience,
Yes,
if I'm hearing correctly.
yes.
Okay, so one more question.
And I guess one of our thinkings was we have less resources this year than we have in the other years as far as kids that are struggling readers. The AIS program is not in place this year, so, and we have teachers moving between classrooms. So our thought was we can't expect more, a lot more with with less, and that was COVID related.
I understand it. It's been a lot more challenging in the last year. You know,
Yeah.
I get that. The other question, you know, I'm drawing a blank now. I apologize. You know, I have one for this, but I think they're more general, so I'll save them to the end.
Okay.
Or to later in the presentation. Thank you.
One thing I would like to point on before we continue on is that a lot of the work that the BLT did is actually we're thinking of this as a multi-year goal, and our goal isn't just 50%, but that's where a benchmark that we're creating for this year. What we're really looking for is, as we've been looking at our own data over the last few years, we certainly see areas where we can improve, and we do understand some of the root causes, but we also feel like the curriculum adjustments and the instructional adjustments that we've been making are targeting these pieces that precedes the beginning of COVID and continues through this year, and it will go into next year as well. And so I guess I just want to mention that we're really taking the longer view as we try to rectify some of these things that we see as challenges, but we also feel like we have a plan to address it as well. And maybe that'll help us move into the next goal area.
Thanks. And Mr. Mahan, a quick follow-up where I thought of the other question, if I can slide for a minute. If the numbers are typical of what you've seen in the past, then it seems like you start the year with a high percentage not reading grade level. You end the year, or at grade level for vocabulary, reading comprehension. You end the year seeing a big increase, but then you have that summer period, and then you go back to where you were at the start before. So honestly, I'm not sure quite what the best question here is, but if you're seeing a lot of regression over the summer, how effectively can you kind of target that period so that there's less of a slide back in the numbers?
So I'm going to take the first crack at that answer, and then I'm going to turn to Mrs. Calvino if she would like to take another swing. So the first thing I'd say is summer regression is a real feature. However, and that's one of the reasons that we've requested that we have the opportunity to create a summer school program for our students, especially this summer. In other years, you know, it used to be a normal part of the elementary way of doing business for our most at-risk kiddos. And this year, we think it's more important than ever. So actually, some teachers and I are already beginning this dialogue now. And we've already shared with the board that we are interested in summer school programming as a budgetary request. And so teachers and I want to develop this set of recommendations for you together. But also, when we look at that data set that Jay is referencing, we also are aware that it is a continuum, but it also has different norms at every single grade level. And so one of the pieces that we really want to look at is we may finish the end of second grade with one set of data, but when we transition to the beginning of third grade, we're in a brand new data set. And our goal is to begin to go beyond those foundational levels into something more sophisticated.
Dave, did you have a question?
I do. Maybe Ms. Calvino can answer this question for me. Can you hear me? Maybe not.
I can hear you sort of.
Okay.
I will try my best.
How about now? In your areas of theories or hypotheses, I could read the whole thing, but number 4, where it talks about teachers are struggling to have adequate focus, I need you to expand on that, and where the plan addresses that. What is the plan to deal with an inadequate focus on implementing what we currently are addressing or offering?
So the inadequate focus, I think I'm hearing a feedback, but the inadequate focus is related to that we have so many programs going on, and we still had a bit of the old reading program happening, and the new reading program, and then we have all these different pockets of other things, and we are working towards implementing just the units of study for writing and reading and phonics. And 2, we are looking at what have we traditionally held on to that we can now get rid of as a result of having the units of study, because there are so many things that are incorporated in that were pieces that people were kind of holding on to before. So that is, those are what we are working on doing there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
I believe now we can continue on to the math, and we'll share that.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to be talking about our math goal. We were really focusing on the iReady math assessment, and we decided that for a goal that we would like to see an increase of 10% for across all grade levels 2 through 5. And then as a subset, having special education students increase 15%. So a couple of our root causes that we discussed was this retention of skills from year to year, that it's lacking. Students lack those basic fluency skills, that sometimes math practice kind of stops. It doesn't happen at home as well. Also, that the textbook is not everything, that there is a very heavy reliance on a textbook for resources, and there are other resources out there other than a textbook. The inconsistency in 15 minutes or more of fact fluency, the underutilization of RTI interventions for all classroom usage, students not taking iReady and the New York State assessments seriously for grades 3 through 5, and then in addition, the 3 through 5 math assessment data not being provided in a timely manner for teachers in order to reflect on what may be some gaps that we need to focus on. So our action plan can actually be broken down into 3 different categories. The first category would be to focus on that consistent use of fact fluency programs between extra math and reflex math, making sure that we're doing that 15 minutes or more of fact fluency practice per day throughout the building. Then in addition, analyzing that student growth from fluency program data. What's been really awesome is celebrating all of those amazing fact fluency goals that students have really been setting and mastering their addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division facts. Mr. Mahan actually announces on the announcements whenever kids do master their facts, and it's actually a great thing to celebrate. So making sure to continue that focus on that consistent use of the fact fluency program. The second category is done collaboratively with teachers, special educators, interventionists, and K through 12 principals, making sure to prioritize those math skills and adjusting curriculum maps as we go through the year. It's really important to make sure that we identify those gaps that students have by analyzing the iReady data that we have, and then developing those strategies that really best support those skills. And that's where that textbook isn't everything kind of comes into play, because sometimes the textbook won't address a certain type of gap that we really need to focus on. So having that collaborative time to analyze the data and then prioritize those math skills moving forward is very important. And then the third part of our action plan was really making sure we're communicating with families that the importance of math facts at home, and then also how to best support that critical thinking skills as well, because they really do go hand in hand. Oftentimes we'll really support ELA and reading at home, but also making sure that we're supporting families to practice those math facts at home is very important.
Go ahead,
Before I
Jay.
continue, any questions?
Jay?
Yes, thank you. Similar question to the ELA slide, let's see, the data that were provided for September results and the end of the year goal, how does that compare to past years' iReady evaluations? Meaning, are the September data that you see now consistent with past years? And the target you set for improvement, is that consistent with the improvement that you've seen in past years?
It is very similar. We have pretty been consistency with typical growth of about 27% on grade level, and we're looking to improve that by 10% and get it to 37% by the end of the year of typical growth. Okay, and for the typical growth, and I guess this would apply to math or ELA, for the percentage you see where there's improvement, is there any way to break that number down more granularly to see if there's a subgroup where most of the progress is lumped, if you will, in one subgroup versus the others? Yes, there is. So the math iReady is actually broken down into 4 different categories of overarching math topics. And it really varies by grade level of what students, where the gaps really lie. But we do have access to that information to really see if maybe our second grade students really are struggling with geometry, or our third grade students are really struggling with measurements. We can break that down and we can really see where those gaps lie for our students. Great, and thank you for that. And just, I realized I should clarify, by subgroups, I meant subgroups of students. I don't know if that's available, but could I just make a general request as a follow-up to this presentation? Could we get this data for each of the years that the iReady analysis has been done? So I think what I'd like to see is the metrics that you have in the data underlying this presentation, for the different ELA metrics, for the different math metrics, start of the year, end of the year, for each of the years and grades that there's data available. If all that could be compiled so that we could see it. And if there is, more granular, like subgroups, whether it's a subgroup of, like say, different skills in math, for example, or subgroups of students, I'd like to see that as well. I just would like to get a better understanding of the big picture here, like not just of the snapshot of where we are right now, but kind of where we've been to. I would appreciate that.
Tracy, you have a question?
Yes, you mentioned that for math, there's the ability to break it down into the different components. My question really pertains to ELA. What are the different components that we can break the iReady down?
We can break it down to phonics, phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, phonics, vocabulary, and informational comprehension, and literature comprehension. And so we have chosen for our goals to use the vocabulary and the comprehension, and that's the literature and informational combined.
Okay, thank you.
Jay?
Welcome.
Hello again. Thank you. One other question. There is, I think the statement was made earlier, and it's in the document of the agenda item, a comment that students don't take the assessment seriously. could you speak more to that? I mean, both to how big of an issue is that, and how do you go about trying to about from the data, how much of it is real versus students just not taking it seriously?
So I think what we really were focusing on is we have really pushed to make sure that I know that every time we do an iReady assessment, Dan sends out an email reminding us of what are good test taking practices for the iReady to really do their best. And similarly to that, we really do that around state testing as well. I think it really depends on grade level, but I know that for third graders, they oftentimes don't quite, they understand what they're doing, but then at the same time, they're also like, this is my first time doing it. And they get kind of overwhelmed because it's their first year taking the New York State assessment. And I think that what we were really discussing was just that students oftentimes just need reminders of that these are great test-taking strategies, and this is how you kind of quell that anxiety that you might have about test-taking. And I'm not entirely, I wouldn't, maybe we should have changed it not to taking it seriously, but maybe kind of downgrading that anxiety that they have and really giving them better strategies on how to really do their best, even though that they feel a little anxious when they do take tests.
And Jay, this is Dan. I think Elizabeth nailed it on a lot of the points. The other thing that we get are flags for our students rushing. So we'll get probably about a dozen to 2 dozen rush flags, and we're able to reset the test, and teachers are able to talk to those students to retake. A lot of times what we have to think at the elementary school, especially in those grades 2 and 3, and actually honestly all the way through, is it's a longer test. This is about a half an hour, and if a student's actually doing well, it can take them a lot longer to get through. So it's a lot of time to be asking a student to sit there and take this test, and towards the end, they can look at their progress. If they see they're towards the end, this is anecdotal data, but some of those kids might be just saying, I see I'm at 90% done. If I click twice, I'm done with this thing. It's very possible. And I think at the elementary school, students are definitely much better at, my teacher asked me to do something, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to try on this. But those conversations we're really starting to work on, and I'll definitely credit all the elementary school teachers for talking to their students about retaking when they see a rush flag, talking to them about why it's important for them to retake. And I'll also credit the middle school teachers who've really started to develop different types of data chats and how they talk to students, which is great information that we can share with elementary school, and vice versa. The great techniques and strategies that the elementary school develops can pass onward as well. So it's a work in progress, but really kind of continuing those conversations about data and why it's important.
Great, that all makes sense. I'm glad to hear that. And to your point that maybe should have been a different choice of words, I actually have heard anecdotally that some students may just not literally take it seriously, don't see the importance of it, don't think there's a need to really try. So literally not taking it seriously. I have no idea if that's one here or there over the years, or if it's dozens. So that's what I thought the comment was getting at, and I was curious to hear about.
I have a question, definitely.
Dave Finch has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah. Elizabeth, maybe you can answer this question for me. I believe that the term typical growth is an iReady term. Is that correct? Could you quantify that, or tell me how I can cross-match that with a more traditional measurement?
Elizabeth, you want to take this one?
Dan, I think that you'd be better suited to answer that question.
So I'm sorry, I was just kidding, totally. So you make a really good point. It is definitely hard to compare. They do give us some comparisons in regards to Lexile levels that we could potentially use to compare to, in reading, to other measures. Typical growth is basically from this large number of students that they've had take the iReady test, and lots and lots of students are taking this thing. They're able to see where a student starts and where they end, regardless of what grade they're on, but specifically where they start, the number scored that they get where they start. they're looking for the amount of growth that any kid who would start at that number would grow within a typical school year. So it's not, they kind of remove the grade level piece. They remove a lot of factors that we normally think of. Are they on grade level? Did they master these grade level skills? Well, they're really looking at the typical growth. Where did the kids start? And based on that specific point, regardless of grade level, where they have seen other kids grow, the typical amount of growth a student that started in that spot would end up by the end of the year. And they also add in stretch growth. And stretch growth is really looking at students who are behind, that they have to make up this chunk of learning. And if they can achieve that stretch growth, they're moving closer and closer towards closing that gap. So we're really starting thinking about typical growth this year. How are we keeping up with our students and working through our instruction to make sure that we're meeting every student where they start and pushing them to get where they need to be by the end of it.
Hey, it's Ray. Just want to pipe in here. The one thing I don't understand is, like, what's the motivation for these kids? Honestly, where's the motivation? When I grew up, they had a good reader read in class. I wanted to be that good reader. So I listened and I broke it down. And I wanted to achieve. Is that happening now?
I'll start first. You know, I think, you know, this is something we celebrate with kids. And like, for example, it's one of the reasons that we celebrate whenever the kids are mastering their facts at whatever level they're mastering at their grade level. So the celebration for a first grader is different from the celebration of a fourth grader, but we try to recognize both. In their classrooms, that is certainly happening. Like when teachers are reading with students and noticing that kids are developing like skills and reading more complex text, then that's something that's celebrated. Today at our faculty meeting, we talked about the importance of celebrating their writing so that in our class, in every single classroom, as kids are kind of reaching new milestones as writers, we're celebrating that in their classrooms. And it looks, again, different that in the primary grades and intermediate, but we're trying to make sure that they're recognizing that. Does that always carry over to them wanting to do their best on some of these larger computer-based assessments? Not necessarily, but they're still the good tool that we have. Now, I will say the kids are very interested in showing off their fact fluency, and that is a computer-based measure. They really want to develop fluency and get all the digital rewards that come with that, as far as green light status and fun games that get to them, all those pieces. Do kids find tests? Our kids, we do have other measures, and these are just some of the measures that we use, right? We're using these measures because there's validity to talk to you about iReady scores. But if we were talking about our classroom chapter tests, the scores would look very different because the kids are very invested in doing their absolute best on those tests. What's different about those tests is that they're smaller in scope, so that when Mrs. Quell is giving a math test, it's on the unit that the kids just discovered as a discrete chunk. It's not a broader based look at the entire year. And so it looks a little bit different, but I think there are opportunities for kids to really feel great about what they do in an assessment window as it relates to their learning.
I know that, that's going way back machine, but when somebody did well on a test, they would always say that so-and-so did well, and not to humiliate the kids that didn't do well, but they would always raise that kid up. So we probably can't do that in today's day and age, but for me, it was a great motivator to say, oh, I need to be that person. We probably can't do that now, right?
There's ways that we can do that. I mean, certainly, I think what you may be discussing is like this whole idea of like, participation award culture, where it's just about the participation. And for some kids, we want to start there, but for a lot of kids, we're going to move way past that really quick, which is why I use the example of like what the kids are celebrating in Writer's Workshop. This week I walked into a classroom and the kids were writing review pieces in second grade, and the teacher was absolutely celebrating the amazing work that those kids were doing. Actually, I'll share a sample of that with Tammy so that she can share it with the board, because it has identifying information on it. We can take that off, but there's lots of opportunities for that. It might look a little bit different, so that instead of a star chart posted in the entire room for everyone to see who has more stars than the other, the star chart might be a more private thing between that student and their teacher and their parents. And so it just looks different.
And to build off of that, Ray, that is actually a lot of where we're looking to share the growth that students are making. It's not so much, did you get the best in your class? It's, did you do better than you did last time? Are you showing growth to the teacher? And that's where we're seeing a lot of the chats happen, is individual conversations with students saying, look how much better you're doing. Look how much you've grown, and showing them the information and saying, these are all the different areas that you've grown. Look how smart you're getting. This is why learning is important, because you can kind of see this growth. We also have, you know, Mr. Mahan said two other really important things. One, this is one piece of multiple measures. Really important to remember that. The other piece he pointed to was something like Reflex Math, where it's a product that's regularly used and students are engaging with quite often. We have iReady that pops up 3 times a year. So that kind of regular investment, and we're seeing themselves each day, you know, that kind of gamification that we see in a lot of programs is saying, each day I can win all these coins by doing better at math. Well, 3 times a year you get an iReady assessment. So it's, you know, a little bit different in terms of motivation.
Yeah, it's kind of what is old is new again, but no, you guys sound like you're doing a great job. I just want to make sure that was happening. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Dan, it's a question related to the growth. Do we also compare it to normative data? And well, let me start with that, then I'll continue from there.
The answer is yes. Dan, do you want to jump in with anything more, or?
No, unless there's something more specific. We do, yeah.
Okay, because I guess for me, it's wonderful if a student is showing growth, and let's say they're showing 30% growth. However, normative data for the student of that age is 50% growth. So in fact, the student is behind. And we have to be very careful that in celebrating the growth, and it's a wonderful achievement, that we're not creating a Matthew effect whereby those that continue to grow and are proficient on grade level versus the people that are growing but are growing at a rate slower than where they're supposed to, they will never catch up. So we have to be really cautious there.
Right. And so we recognize both of those. And so, for example, our report cards for our students, you know, as we're talking about their growth compared to their own progress, that's one way we evaluate it. But we also are always evaluating them against the New York State standard. And so that other piece comes into play both on report cards and on their chapter tests and all the other areas. And so one of the things we've been able to do in the last 2 years is not only make sure that we're giving the same tests across the grade level, and I'm talking about classroom tests now, that if you're a 4th grader, everyone is taking this test as they go through 4th grade. And I'll speak to math, that they're going to take all these units. But we're making sure that every teacher is interpreting those scores in a consistent manner. And so that the benchmark is the same, so we're communicating with every family and every student about their progress in a consistent manner, not just in comparison to themselves, but in comparison to standards as well.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. H, I think we can go to the next slide, and then we can always circle back if people need. So this next, at the beginning of the presentation, we talked a little bit about that we use achievement data from multiple sources, that we use perceptual data, and that we use demographic data. And this goal was specific to perceptual data. That every year we ask parents and students and teachers and our whole school community to do a perceptual survey. And that has questions on it that they respond, 1 to 5 type responses, but they also have responses where they can just open field, what would you like us to know about what are we doing well and what could we work on? And so this area addresses that particular set of data. And when, as a school, what we saw is when we had 178 different parent responses regarding our school, and either things that were going well or things that we could do differently. And out of those 178, there was a small percentage, 13 parents were particularly concerned about bullying at the school. And we drew a comparison between that and linked that to something that that parents were also saying, that students, when we asked the question, students show respect for other students, we got an average score of 3.5. And we thought, this is not awful, but this is something we could probably do better. And so we want to raise that score next time we ask the same question by 10%. Now, some of it might be that we don't use the same definitions about some of the terms that we talk about in school. Maybe when parents use the term bullying and the school uses the term bullying, are we talking about apples to apples? But we also probably recognize that we have kids with skill deficits, and that we also realize that we may not be telling parents about all the great things that are happening in school. And so when they hear about a problem or they see a problem posted on social media, that they don't have enough information to put that into the greater context of what's happening within the course of this kid's school day. So some of our actions are, that we really want to continue to adjust our anti-bullying program. And now I know you all know that because we've been working as a No Place for Hate school. We were recognized last year. This is something we're seriously. But we're also trying to use all the program pieces that we have, and Mrs. Calvino spoke to this, that we have a lot of really good elements, but as the standards in New York State kept changing over the last few years, it forced us into these curriculum silos where our ELA and reading instruction is very separate from our writing instruction. It's very separate from math, separate from character ed, separate from social studies. And we want to start looking for ways to link those things back together. And so right about a year before COVID, the state released social emotional learning objectives. And we want to start linking that to some of the other programs that we already have, like Responsive Classroom, where there's a lot of synergy amongst these things. But maybe it could help teachers be more efficient in how they do it with their students. We also, in talking with our parent members on BLT, realized, let's talk about the things that we're doing really well in school so parents can know. And then also they said, and if at all possible, make it so that we can read it quickly. Like bullet it in the newsletters that you send out if you can. So that it grabs our attention so that we know what's going on. So those are some of the actions. One of the things that we do want to do that would be new for us recently is, since before COVID, we've really done very little with using students as teaching partners. We were trying to do this in our student assemblies when we were having live student assemblies based on bullying and all the roles that kids can play to be, good helpers at school. But we haven't done that since COVID. That's something we need to come back to so it doesn't fall out of our bag of tricks to support students in this area. And then also, we just need to make sure that we're really getting lots of feedback on this, not just on surveys, but as we go through the year so that we can communicate better. So if we do those things, we think we can see an increase not only in the open-ended comments, but also in the rated comments as well.
So the social emotional learning piece, this is actually based on the perception survey results from the faculty that was given last year. The average response score during that was about 3.53, where teachers were familiar with the New York State social emotional standards at their specific instructional level. And our end of the year goal for this is to increase that average response score to a 4.0 or higher. So some of the root causes that we had discussed about this piece was that ELA and math really have taken precedence, so that the social emotional standards have not really been fully communicated to all teachers, that there has been limited professional development on the implementation of these social emotional practices, and just in general, teachers feeling overwhelmed by all the curriculum. So this can also be broken down into kind of 3 categories of action steps. The first one is actually being administered this week in our school, which is that teachers are administrating a student screener in grades 3 through 5. And once that screener has gone through, the screener is basically going to ask students about their own social emotional learning and kind of gauge how they feel they are as far as social emotional learning. And once that screener has been complete, then the PPS and principal are going to make sure to analyze that data in order to start making those programming recommendations. The second action step is really posting those social emotional skill lists in classrooms so that it's a visual reminder to students that these are things that we are working on as social emotional learners. Then the third piece would really be dependent on that screener result as well, but figuring out ways to really integrate those social emotional resources to establish strategies that will allow lessons to be incorporated into that core curriculum. So not adding one more thing, but really focusing on how we can really make it part of the ELA and math curriculum already. Really focusing on that, bringing back that responsive classroom and that zones of regulation language that we had already started, and really pushing forward to make sure that's still being practiced in our classrooms. I did talk to Melissa Sanison, and she actually wanted to share one super awesome thing that she's really looking forward to come out of this 3 through 5 screener that we're implementing right now. And she's really excited because over the summer, she really wants to be able to review that screener data with her and the school psychologist, and be able to provide families with literature and future coffee hours and videos so that we can best support students at home as well as in school with their social emotional learning. That kind of goes back to what Pete was saying about making sure that parents really understand what it is that we're trying to reinforce at school, but also how can parents focus on these high need areas that all of our students really need.
Go ahead, Duncan.
What or who, or I guess I'm going to say what credentials does the screener have? Is it one of our faculty? Is it somebody from Questar? I like the last part of your comments that they want to work it out over to some, but what quals does the screener bring to the process?
So the screener was actually created by our school psychologists and counselors. So they got, I believe, I know that they researched in order to help figure out what do we really need to ask our students 3 through 5 in order to really see if they have those social emotional skills that we're supposed to be teaching them.
The screener is a test or
The screener is a test? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, so it's a Google form that the students, basically they're asked questions such as, do they feel like they are a good friend, or do they feel like they belong?
Oh, that's fine. I misunderstood what the screener was, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't just somebody who was taking on another task. Thank you.
Go ahead, Brooke. Go ahead, Brooke.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on the screener question, since I have been working with the PPS group to develop this screener, as well as Jennifer Bachant from Building Better Futures. The screener was developed based on the SEL standards that were put forth through the state education department. So each question is aligned with those standards. Therefore, when the students answer those questions, we're able to gather the data on what skill level that they need to achieve according to those specific standards.
Works for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just wanted to just clarify that a little bit, because we've been working on that for the past couple months with the PPS
I was
group.
entirely in left field. I thought when you talked about a screener, to me, that was an individual who would be interviewing each of the students. And that concern, I don't know that it concerned me as much as I didn't understand how it would be, how effective it would be. I understand what you're doing now. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So I joined the elementary BLT on their last goal in regards to chronic absenteeism. The goal itself was derived from some of our ESSA data, and the goal being to reduce our chronic absenteeism rates from 14.4 to 14.2%. The BLT researched some root causes and worked together to develop some root causes potentially linked to the chronic absenteeism numbers. Those include lacking a school connection, our ability to systematically explore the reason behind the absence and the root cause of that absence, lack of interventions targeting chronically absent students, really doing things different in a proactive way when we know a student has a history of being chronically absent and really kind of supporting them from the start of the year all the way through. And finally, thinking about the link between absenteeism and trauma and anxiety, and looking for some interventions that are specifically designed to target those needs that students have, because we know that some of those needs are much different than some of the other barriers that students face when not being able to get to school. So I joined the BLT to talk about some different action steps. Continuing our weekly meetings focused on attendance. This is a weekly meeting we have at the elementary office, including a variety of stakeholders, looking at each student who has progressed to the next step in our attendance policy, looking for next steps that we have to take in terms of the process, but also in different ways that we can help support that student and family. And making sure that we're sharing the attendance process with all of our classroom teachers, something that we get in the groove with, and sometimes we forget to make sure that we're explaining it and reminding people of how we work through this attendance process, as well as making sure that they're informed when a student has moved up and getting another letter based on our attendance process, making sure that the teacher is a partner as we're working to communicate with families. Thinking about different recognition ideas. We heard some great recognition that was happening with our math facts, over the announcements, and we've seen what a great support that is for students when they hear their names being called for their positive work, and thinking about how we can use that for attendance as well. Thinking about how we can use our high schoolers, especially those in our child development classes or our seniors who are working on some service hours, really thinking about how can we get them in touch with some of our at-risk students, because sometimes we realize that students are better supported by other students and that they might respond better to working with peers. And finally is thinking about how we can utilize our PBS staff for thinking about what are those issues behind anxiety and trauma, and how we can use specially designed interventions to support them.
Jay? Go ahead, Jay.
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks for Cash. So I actually have a couple questions just going to the goal. If you could remind me and everyone what how chronic absenteeism is defined, first of all.
Sure.
I'm sorry, start there. I'll pause.
Yes, no, that's okay. The state defines it as a student missing 10% or more of the school year.
Okay. And the next question, if it's at 14.4%, percentage of what? Is it percentage of students at the high school level, middle, elementary, K-12?
So I'll start answering that question, and Mr. Hilgendorf, our ESSA champ, can feel free to support me, but that is, should be students in grades K through 5, absenteeism. He can probably have the exact year that information was taken from.
Oh, right, I realized I lost track of the fact this is the elementary school plan, sorry. Ask me if it goes beyond 5th grade, okay. And then the last question is, you're going from 14.4% to 14.2. In real terms, what does that mean? Is that you have it changing 1 student or 5 or 10 from chronic to not chronic?
That's a great question. It's a very small number of students. So it's certainly an attainable goal. That exact number of students I do not have, but we can get that exact number.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to add to Jay's comments, because I think he's going in the same direction I am. I don't see a 0.2% much of a goal. A goal, I would see a number of maybe going to 10%, and it may be a stretch since we really don't know the numbers, but 0.2% a very small number of people that would be classified as chronic absenteeism doesn't seem like much of a goal to me.
This is one of those areas where, because it is now March and a lot of the days, we've already been in school for 100 days of school. This plan was developed for basically the final few months of the school year. If you were looking at this to be a full year plan, we would have made that number much different. We were trying to be conservative just because it's really March, April, May, June. But your point is well taken.
What will the goal be for 21-22 then? Have any idea? Or give me an example of what a goal might be.
So
I would.
I can add a little context too. So the number of 14.4 actually comes from our 18-19 ESSA data, which is the last year the state provided that data for attendance. So that comes out of our ESSA report. The 14.2 is Greenville Elementary's chronic absenteeism rate is better than across the state. So our expectation to improve is lower in that area. That's why that number from the ESSA numbers looks small. 14.4 to 14.2 still maintains us in an acceptable ESSA range. Can we certainly do more than that? Yes. To speak to what Dan and Pete were talking about, the other piece that we were looking at locally as we worked on that specific number was, for this current year, what does the attendance rate look like? That's a little wonky to begin with because of COVID and knowing that attendance is going to be affected in a different way this year. When we looked at September to December for chronic absenteeism at the elementary school, the numbers were actually higher than they had been in recent years. So we wanted to make sure that 14.2 compared to 14.4 doesn't seem like a stretch or that high of a goal or that hard of a goal. But when we compared it to what we were looking at from September to December, we felt like that 14.2 was an appropriate goal from where we were starting this school year, but also maintaining what we needed to for our ESSA scores. That helps or makes it more confusing, I don't know.
Oh, it helps.
Some of this gets challenging.
You muddied the waters, Todd.
Because of the ESSA data that's kind of at this point outdated, the targets that are set by the state for individual schools and across the state, and then the current school year of COVID and the complications that adds, trying to be realistic but also set goals for ourselves.
You may speak now, Jay.
Thanks. I understand, as you said, that COVID has its own effect on absenteeism. With all that said, what is the chronic absenteeism rate that you have now for September to December?
I'm pulling that up because I knew that was going to be the next question. I can look it up.
Okay, thanks. And if you could also, I'm not sure if you literally look it up like tonight or not, but I think, well, actually, going back how far do you have data on chronic absenteeism? Is it back to the 18-19 ESSA benchmark, or do you have it dating farther back too?
So in terms of state data, ESSA data, the accountability of ESSA shifted during the 18-19, correct, Scott? Help me out. So that was the first year that the state reported it in that way. We could look back further using our own local data, but in terms of ESSA scores, it's really only the 18-19 school year that we first got those numbers in that way. Previously, it just looked at total attendance. So when we say, like, on any given day, our attendance is 95%, meaning 95% of students are here. That was the old way of looking at data for attendance for accountability. Under ESSA, it shifted and started looking at this chronic absenteeism rate to look at those students that are high risk, because our total attendance rate is still in the 90s. That sounds great. When you start looking at it from chronic absenteeism, it starts to narrow where your focus should be. So all that to say, we have ESSA numbers only for the past couple of years, but we could go back further in time just using local data to get an estimate of what that chronic absenteeism rate was previously.
Right, and to be clear, I'm not asking you to do that work. I think you guys have enough on your plate. One question, though, again, understanding that it may be skewed by COVID, I don't remember if you said what the chronic absenteeism rate was for the 19-20 year.
1920 school year, we don't have good attendance data because from March on, we had school closure and emergency learning. We have
Right.
chronic absenteeism rate, just looking at the percentage of time from September through, well, up until the March closure. We could look at it from that standpoint. Again, we can look at get all those numbers specifically.
Sure. If you could do the September to March to the closure, again, I understand the caveats that apply to it. If you could follow up with that, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
I have one more question, and I want to address it to Mr. Hash and Mr. Mahan, but I promise it'll be my last question. And some of your data on your plan, or some of your points on your plan, you mentioned that the 3 through 5 assessments were and they are. The data is late in providing information to parents. It's actually so late that it's probably difficult to schedule services, maybe even. And then combined with that, the students' attitude toward testing, and then their participation in the tests, and then their absenteeism. I'm wondering if you can tell me, when do we engage the parents? When do we go over? Do we ever sit down with parents and point out challenges that their particular child is having?
So that's actually a really excellent question. A couple things. First of all, as far as the data being in real time versus delayed and all that, the biggest delay is with the state assessment. We are expecting that we'll have the state assessments this year, and we're expecting they'll look different than what we've ever had before. And we are expecting that will also be delayed in our report. So we know all of those things will continue to be true of the state data. That's one of the advantages of layering into that the iReady data, because that we get that data back in real time. And so, for example, last month we gave the ELA and the mathematics assessments through iReady, and we could take that and return that information back to the teachers and say, here's what we see in the data. We want you to compare this to what you're seeing in your classroom in real time. And then the teachers can take that and layer that into how does that compare to their classroom performance. And then teachers can share that information back with parents. We actually have a fair amount of tools now to communicate with parents, even though it's COVID time. A lot of our teachers use Seesaw, and they use Google Classroom, and there's ways that they're communicating back and forth in a very dynamic way. So that really does help. If teachers are concerned that a student isn't taking this particular set of assessments seriously, they can have that as a conversation with parents saying, I think this may not be the best predictor of the student's learning, but this one is a good indicator. And talking back and forth about that. So it becomes more about the art of it more than the science of it, as far as just looking at a single data set. So I think those things are still possible and very doable right now, and not necessarily compromised by the fact that we're in COVID. If Elizabeth or Laura want to address that or reshape that in any way.
No, I just agree with you, Peter. We have a lot of tools to use to communicate with parents, and we use the phone. I mean, as soon as we get the scores and we see how the kids, these iReady and the state assessments are just a fraction of what we use to constantly monitor kids' progress. So we are doing it through observations in the classroom, through running records, through chapter tests, daily work, everything. So, I mean, it's just a fraction, and we use all of that information. And when there's a concern, we do contact parents, and we also have like parent-teacher conference days, but also Seesaw has been a wonderful tool, the Google Classroom, and just the regular old phone.
Hey, just to put my 2 cents in, I can't tell you enough how when I was growing up in Greenville that there were several teachers who reached out above and beyond with the parents. I personally had no phone, but my parents, they reached out to my parents in other ways. So, and I commend the teachers who do that. But what is the motivation for a kid today to say, you know, I want to achieve? What's the carrot that we're waving? What's going on? Because that's what I'm worried about. Because, you know, these kids and most adults will take the path of least resistance. So, I mean, what are we doing to motivate the kid? That's really what I'm concerned with.
You asked that question earlier, and I didn't chime in at that point, but we feel very strongly with the reading and writing units of study, the workshop approach that we are now implementing in our building, that children, and part of the reason that we chose it is because it's highly engaging and motivating for kids. There is a constant opportunity for kids to make choices of things that they're interested in, to study the things that they're interested in, to write about the things that they're interested in. And also on a daily basis, they get the opportunity to share with their classmates. At the end of every lesson, they share for writing and reading. And then we have these celebrations built in that they can, be part of every time they finish a unit. They celebrate with one another. They see themselves as readers and writers. And it's amazing how much, when they're sharing constantly and given that opportunity, that they push themselves. They want to be like the other readers that they see in the room. They want to be like the other writers. They hear what the other kids are doing. They work really hard for that. I just remember a kindergarten teacher a couple years ago, when she first introduced the writing workshop. Was it phonics? One of the workshops that she first did. She was like, it was just like fire caught on these kids, and I've never seen kids at mid-year like this push themselves so hard in kindergarten, and they are achieving so much more. So we really feel strongly about this program that we are providing to kids now, that carrot is really there for them, and it's a real meaningful carrot.
Good, thanks again. I didn't mean to reiterate my first question, but in today's world, it's just, you wonder what gets a kid out of bed and wants them to learn, really, with everything that's going on. So, but I do appreciate it, and teachers are the key. Thank you very much.
We really appreciate you. Actually, this was unusual tonight in that this is so much more of a dialogue throughout the entire presentation. We just want to say thank you for making it that way for us. We appreciate it.
Mr. Mahan, I'd like to thank you. I mean, if I could jump in now, thank you, and especially Mrs. Quell and Mrs. Calvino. We have had a very full discussion of this. I really appreciate everyone tonight taking the time to talk through it, patience to deal with my questions and the questions from the rest of the board. I think this is an important discussion, and I do appreciate everyone's time and attention to it tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Again, thank you, Mrs. Calvino and Mrs. Quell, and all the other BLT members who have logged in. Thank you very much.
I need a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of February the 8th, February the 22nd, and March the 1st.
Okay, I have Eric and Dave.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 I need a motion to approve the finance reports for the month ending February 28th.
Okay, Tracy, second. Duncan?
Any discussion on the finance reports? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
I need a motion to accept the Committee on Special Education recommendations.
Okay, Tracy and Eric.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 I need a motion to approve the personnel agenda.
Duncan and Eric.
Any discussion? No? No? All in favor?
Aye.
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 I just want to, there's 2 action items. I want to thank Jay Henry, who is retiring, and Matt Ward, who's leaving. Jay's leaving April 2nd, so if anyone sees him around campus. And Matt is June 30th. I want to thank them for the years that they have given Greenville and all of the work they have completed on behalf of our students.
Yes. Thank you. Did you get everybody?
I did. Yeah.
I need a motion to accept the resolution dated March 8th at the Board of Education adopting the proposed public employer health emergency plan.
Okay, Tracy, second. Eric.
Any questions on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the elementary school comprehensive education plan.
Okay, Eric. Second. Tracy.
And we've discussed it, so all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Sorry, slow to the mute button.
I need a motion to approve the election inspectors for the annual vote on May 18th and appoint the Board of Voter Registration for 2021.
Tracy, second. Eric. Thank you.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 I need a motion to approve the Health and Welfare Services contract between the Greenville Central School District and the Bethlehem, North Colony, and Saugerties Central School Districts.
Okay, Dave. Second. Tracy.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 I need a motion to approve the request for approval of a new textbook.
Tracy, second. Eric.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I need a motion to award the 21-22 fuel bid through DCMO BOCES bid process to Bottini Fuel and Mirabito Energy Products.
All right, Duncan, second. Eric.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Can I ask a question?
Aye.
It's a curiosity. This is for next year's?
Aye.
Okay, I think everybody voted on it too.
Yes.
Thank you.
I need a motion to award the contract transportation bid to Coxsackie Transport for the 31-day emergency route and remaining year route to Hillcrest Educational Center, Housatonic Academy.
Okay, I have Tracy and Eric. Thank you.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I need a motion to approve surplus items.
Tracy and Eric. Thank you.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, under discussion, budget update.
Okay,
Janet?
so we've had 3 changes since the March 1st Board of Education meeting. The school resource officer has a reduction of $944. The printer lease has a reduction of $5,500, and one cross-contract with BOCES has a reduction of $171. So now it comes down to, the budget net now is $32,799,528, which is a 1.69% overall increase to the budget. With these reductions, we are able to decrease the appropriated fund balance unplanned by $6,615. I prepared a handout to show the overview of the budget. It's shown, it gives you the full picture of the budget by program, capital, and administrative. It shows you the expenditures at a glance, like all the salaries up together. And also it shows revenues with all the percentages for the revenues. So to recap, there have been no program changes to the budget. Everything is status quo with programming curriculum. Tuition for our special education students going to private or BOCE schools have increased quite a bit, which then in turn increases the contract transportation line. We did have several retirements, which has helped reduce the budget, and that came out to $222,743. For the services aid reduction question from the last meeting, I did some more research on how the governor was trying to figure out the services aid reduction. So it is the lower of A, our district wealth factor, which is 0.905, times the per pupil reduction amount of $148.80. I do not know how the state came up with that number. So you multiply those two numbers, comes out to $131.94 times the enrollment, so it's about $145,300. Or the pandemic adjustment, that $1,065,454, less the pandemic grants, which is the same number, so that is 0, which is why we do not have a services aid reduction. So as the next few weeks go by, I will be adjusting the budget as needed, but the real important date is that April 1st date when the legislators come up with their budget to see if there's changes to state aid. Any questions?
So it's just a wait and see at this point until the
Can't do
1st?
anything.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Janet. Reminder, the Questar 3 annual meeting is April 14th. If anyone's interested, you have to let Daphne know, right?
Yeah, I can share the link.
Okay. Also, board leadership development is March 20th. That's a reminder. Now, we also had the second reading of the update to policy 6372, data security and privacy policy. Do these individually? They're not action
Well,
items.
I mean, we can
right?
probably just, yeah, they're not action items. There's quite a few of them listed. I mean, if anybody has any.
Well, you want me to read them off individually and see if there's any?
Good.
Okay, so then it was also second reading for policy number 6120, sexual harassment policy. Jump in if there are any questions as I'm reading these.
Duncan?
I read somewhere that the governor has changed the nominations, the number of nominations. Can you give us a recap off the top of your head? If not, I'm
Just that
sorry.
normally it's 2% of the number of voters from the previous election or a minimum of 25.
Right.
We did have a larger turnout last year, which would have increased it to, I think I actually did it the other day, and it would have been 125 or something like that. So now it's down to, for this
50,
year,
right?
only 25.
Yeah.
So an interested board candidate would need to only get 25 signatures to.
Same as it's been?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we normally only have like
Say again?
5, and so we normally only have like 5 to 700 people
Right.
voting.
Right.
I had a question on policy 1120, the board development policy. So I don't know, are we going through it individually? I was a little confused.
Oh, but they didn't get to that one yet. Okay. We can
It's the third one.
Okay. Board policy development? Sure, go ahead.
So on that, in reading through it, the numbering that we're using is not following the NISBA numbering. So like if you go to the index policy on NISBA, then it's a different numbering. So one of the things that, for example, the sexual harassment on NISBA says it's listed as 0110, but we're numbering it as 6120. So I think that by following the same numbering, we can be more efficient so that if we're looking to what NISBA's policies are, if we needed to add one, then it's easier to cross-reference, I think, for that. So I don't know if I need to make a motion to make a change to this policy so that we follow NISBA's numbering and just kind of are consistent.
Should that go before the policy committee?
Well, just for a little background, we did speak with Wendy DeWin, who is the attorney that works with the school district on all of our policies. And we asked her about the numbering, and she's basically said that everyone's numberings are their own. So NISBA does do policies, and so they have their numbering. And Erie 1, she wasn't sure who started the numbering, does mirror NISBA's numbering, but she said the numbering is whatever you want it to be. So we have a lot less policies. So Wendy DeWin, the belief that we're under is we're having policies for where we are required to have policies. We're not generating. So if you look at NISBA, there'll be a large, thicker book of a lot of policies. So if we tried to mirror them, I don't know if we would be able to mirror all of them. And we would definitely not have the same number of them. We wouldn't have the same policies as NISBA because we're not having them do our policies. So her recommendation, she said you could have policy number 1. She said you could have A, B, C, D, that there's no law about what policy numbers you attach to a policy.
Right, but like if we're looking at, let's say the policy committee is looking at, okay, these are the required ones, if you go on to NISBA and say, there's a link and it says, these are the required ones, we can't cross-reference them. And then I looked at a couple of other schools just in our area, and they're following NISBA. So I guess that why wouldn't we just follow best practices?
I guess the question is it a best practice? Does it matter?
Right. I mean, if it's difficult to do, maybe it's something we can do over the summer, because if this is just for, if we amend it saying,
You have to rename them.
for
I know.
this is the board policy,
It's a lot of work.
I recognize that. And so I'm not saying that it's something that needs to be done tomorrow. Maybe it's over the summer, but I think that it's a reflection of who we are as a board. And it's,
So why do you think it has to match NISBA's policies?
because that is the standard for policies for all school boards. That is the association. Well, it's the, isn't NISBA the association that we follow as
Yeah.
school board members?
Yeah, it is, but it's not the standard. The standard is, I mean, they don't set any standards.
So why are
I'm not
others?
sure how to characterize what's there,
Okay,
whether I
so-
would characterize as recommendations or whatever, but they don't set a standard.
They have their own service. that
Okay.
School districts pay NISBA to do their policies. And then they number them according to how they want them numbered.
Right, but isn't there consistency in that other schools, if you go on their website and you look at the policies, the majority of them are following the numbering?
They may use NISBA as a
As a
source.
guide, sort of, yeah.
Right.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to plead dumb because I don't know how intense it would be. Why would it be intense to change the numbering?
I think probably just lining them up, finding what policy that matches.
And is it word for
They
word
don't,
the
fo-
same?
in other words, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's not that way?
No.
Half of them match and half of them don't. So for example, I think where the issue comes in is in the 5,000. So prior to that, most of them match. And then in the 5,000 range, something got shifted, and then following down, they don't.
Okay, I didn't see any of that, so, I mean, I
Okay,
didn't pick up on it. No,
right.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm trying to figure out if we have counsel that it doesn't make any difference. Okay, I'd like to support the concept that you project,
Okay.
but if it's timely, if it's timely intense or personnel intense, I don't know that it's worth it. If we have counsel that it's not necessary to have the execs. It seems to me somebody had thought to ask a question. Do we need to number them exactly the same way or not? And if we got counsel from, I think I heard you say our attorneys, okay, then it seemed to me that if it were a trivial issue, I support 100%.
Right.
If it's labor intensive, I don't think it's worth the effort if we've got.
Right.
And when you say the majority, do you find some that don't? I didn't look at that, so I have no
I
idea.
haven't. I went through, I honestly looked at about 5 schools because I was actually looking at some of their policies. And so I was like, oh, what do other schools have? And I just went, and it was very easy to find because you just go on there and
One
it
equals one.
follows all of the numbers. And it was only when I tried to retrieve our policies to say, what is our policy, that actually it was a lot more difficult. So I understand it's labor intensive, but I do think it's a reflection of who we are as a school. And if we're asking,
That I can't understand,
why?
because the document is ours, and it states who we are. The fact that it's numbered differently from somebody else's doesn't change any of the content.
But, okay, so let me ask this. If there's a standardization of stop signs that says, in general, we've determined that stop signs are red. And then we decide that we're going to have purple stop signs. So someone comes and we're looking at it, and it's like, wonder why they're doing that. But that's one thing. But honestly, it was more from the standpoint of, if we are looking at, it's what I was doing, that I went to a policy that NISBA had, and then I was trying to cross-reference it with ours. And you cannot do that necessarily. You can do it for half of the instances, but you can't do it for others.
I support.
So if we're saying that
your
it's
concept
work,
and reference.
I'm sorry?
I support your conferences, or your concept is, if someone wants to reference policy to policy, the numbering system or indexing system makes it easy. But Tammy's question or statement makes me wonder is if the association has a program that they market or provide, are they in ownership of the numbering system to be as simple as it is?
Right.
So that might be some research, but I appreciate your work on that.
Yeah, I think it was a good catch, but if the only reason is to change it to coincide with the numbering system, I don't know why you would be looking at their policy and then try to go to us.
I can see that,
what our
Duncan.
policy is.
If we ran into a snag on something and somebody on the outside wanted to catch us, I can see them saying, well, your neighboring districts, because of ease of research, can say, well, their policy is this, their policy is this, and then they can go to the association and say, well, the overriding.
All I do is a Control F and I find what I want.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the end of the world. I do a Control F and type in a sentence, and it'll bring me right to where I am. Or type in 3 words, and it'll bring me right to where I am. So I'm not sure that again, I would support your concept if it weren't labor intensive. If it's labor intensive and I leave that up to Tammy to decide,
Right.
then don't do it.
Well, it's actually not that labor intensive because the using Word, if you set it up as a book and you do it as a table of contents, then it quickly cross-references it. It would be labor intensive if you do each page.
I would like to pick on Jay because he's had his hand raised for a little bit, if I may, and then go to you, Eric. Go ahead, Jay.
Thanks. Just a couple comments. First, I'd suggest taking it step by step. You know, I think my assumption is if we were to change the numbering, we'd have to do it through a majority vote. Like, does the board have to? That would be a board action, right? Change the number. Is that correct or no?
I would say so because
Okay.
you've already accepted the policy. The policies have that number.
Right.
I think it would
Right.
have to be done by that.
So I think just as a first step, if the board, whether we have to vote or not, if there's a consensus that, you know, there's support for the idea, then we can turn to the question of, you know, how labor intensive would it be? And, you know, we could ask the board, whether it's Tracy or me on the policy committee or someone else, to try to figure out how difficult would it actually be to map our policies to NISBA's. Maybe when you look at it, our Article 1s track to a cluster with NISBA. One complicating factor there, I think, is when I looked at the NISBA policies, you see a table of contents that you have to request the actual policy. So I think unless it's clear from the name, there might be some extra steps there. But anyway, if there was a consensus on the board that you want to move forward with this, we could then take the next step of looking to see how hard it would be. And if it turns out to be easier, whichever way it goes, I guess, we could then decide, you know, is it worth investing that effort? It's just a suggestion. I mean, honestly, I see the point in the trying to have a more uniform, I guess, numbering system across from district to district, but you know, I don't know. I guess I'm just curious to know if there is a consensus developing or not.
Go ahead, Eric. Thank you, Jay.
I'm not a good person on this because I consider them to be just labels and you just go look at the label. But as far as if we have to review each policy because we change the number, I don't want to go through and revisit every policy just to go yay or nay on it. And I think that as far as the book goes, every book has an index and a table of contents, and every book is different. I mean, if the state wanted us to use the same format, they would have made it that way. So I appreciate the effort and the idea that if it was in alignment, it would be easier to cross-reference. But at this point, I don't want to make busy work.
Okay.
So you want to take a vote or just?
No, there's no need for vote.
Just
Well,
discussion.
Daphne and I will look at it to see, you know, what,
Well, things changed back in
Right.
2016. That's what
right,
happened.
that's when we changed
Right.
everything. So let me just suggest that Daphne and I take a look at it, and we can report back.
Okay.
I had one other thing for policy 6122, the student sexual harassment. And my question is, where does one go to know who the Title IX coordinator is? Can this information be included in the policy? It just references Title IX, but I think in one of the other ones, it specifically mentions an individual. So we don't necessarily have to put the individual, but I think, you know, does it say it's appointed every year in the July?
Right.
That should be on the website. It shouldn't be on the policy because then you would have to change policy every time that
But we-
position or person changes.
We have it specifically in one of the other policies.
Okay.
So where we mention an individual.
Probably should be a
Because it
role.
mentions
Should be a
Erin.
position.
Yeah, it
Right,
should be a
not a
position.
name.
So then that
One
would
of the
have
ones we're
to be
looking at right now,
changed.
Daphne, Tracy, or one of the ones that are on here right now?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
because I read them. I was going through. So, you know what, I'll go through and find which one. It might be,
Is it the regular sexual harassment policy? Because that is one that we've had for a while. So it might actually be in that document, I'm thinking. But the student sexual harassment is a brand-new policy,
okay,
which
so
is the reason why it might be so generic.
it mentions Erin, which is So then it would be, let's see, sexual harassment policy. Let me see if I can find it quickly in it. But I know it said specifically reference and contact, whether it was HR and the person's name is Erin. So right here, yep. Section 1, district's compliance officers are Erin Dubois, Assistant Superintendent. So officer is.
Okay, I will
Okay.
review that with Wendy before our next.
For that. So, and then I guess how would one then find who the Title IX coordinator is? Do we need to check?
said it should be
just
on the
reference?
website.
But then in the policy, should it say refer to the website? I mean, if someone's just reading this and they're ready to file a complaint, and we're providing half the information, I mean, reference, go to the website. It is, or is listed on the website. So it just seems,
That's a valid point.
yeah.
I can update that.
Well, where is that? Not, where is it? Is it on the,
Her name, yeah, I found it. It's under the original sexual harassment policy, the one that we updated on section 1. It's
no, I see that. I'm on that. I'm talking about Tracy's question.
Is it on the website?
Yeah, where would I find that now?
Title IX?
Yeah.
On the website.
Daphne's checking.
The person's appointed every July.
So it'll be on the org meeting, that's correct. It's got to be under Ardasa.
But I don't know that
That's the principal's
a
Daphne.
parent or someone would know to go to the July meeting.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
Google on our site, Title IX coordinator, it doesn't come up with anything.
Okay. We can address that.
Maybe we say as appointed every July in the meeting, reference that, however the committee wants to.
I think it should be easier than that.
I agree.
Should be more clearer than that.
Okay.
I don't know if it's under family resources. We can just look quick.
Maybe even handbooks, so I will look into that.
I'm going to go back and start over.
Okay.
I'm going to read these all individually. Policy 6372, data security and privacy. Policy 6120, sexual harassment policy. Policy 1120, board policy development. Policy 5220, notice of breach of security. Policy number 6122, student sexual harassment, which is a new policy. That's the second reading. First reading, update to policy 6240, drug, tobacco, and alcohol abuse. First reading, update to policy 6270, student organizations. First reading, update to policy 6280, student publications. First reading, a new policy, 9010, gender neutral bathrooms. Okay. Input items for discussion at a future meeting.
There was some discussion about the iReady information, and so I know that we've done the second wave of information, and it's not necessarily for next month, but perhaps we could get a presentation with kind of a breakdown. I'd be curious to some of the math skills and the ELA, not just a general, but more information.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I have something also, Pat. I don't know if we wanted to talk about this in our leadership meeting or in the next business meeting in April or somewhere. But I have some concerns about the proposed testing that the Federal Education Commission wants to impose on schools this year. And I don't think, I know it's just come out, and I know I've been keeping abreast on it. I know that that state ed is trying to get excused from it. I know that our board association is not in favor of it, and I know that NICET is not in favor of it. And I'm wondering what the purpose is. I'm wondering what the results are going to be used for. I think almost anybody can assume that the results are going to be skewed. They're not going to be the same as years past. So I don't know what the purpose, other than finding out where the students stand. I understand that. But I'm afraid that may not be the sole purpose of these tests. And as our teachers have presented tonight, I think the teachers in our district can tell us where our students stand. I don't know how comparisons will work because between schools. Our school is probably doing awesome. If we're compared against Albany High that hasn't been in session in I don't know how long. Our school with the hybrid versus a school that's fully remote versus a school that's maybe full-time. How are those comparisons even going to be valid? So those are my concerns, and I'm wondering if there would be interest, and I'm wondering how effective it would be, but I'm wondering if there would be interest in the board even drafting a letter of not supporting these tests, but I'm not in favor of them. But that's a discussion item, Pat.
Okay.
And then also, on the educational plans, it seems like absenteeism has come up on all the plans, and I know it's a required part of ESSA, but I'd like to have some, I know that Todd and administrators offered some information on absenteeism earlier, maybe even a year ago. If they could, not right away, because I realize that everybody's busy, but to refresh us so we know where we stand with absenteeism at a historical basis, how, and it's not unique to Greenville. So we had better grasp on what numbers mean. That's it, Pat. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any other suggestions?
I'd like to
Duncan?
add to Dave's point. You know, when I grew up, we talked about truant officers all the time. I don't think there's anything such today. What is our recourse to go outside? As part of that analysis, what is the recourse that we have as a district to try to compel students or to get students in? Where does it stop? Does it go from us to the county, or what happens? I don't know what happens, and I'd like to understand that part of it too.
Oh, that's part of that presentation. That's a great idea.
Yes.
Right.
That was support for your idea.
Thank you. I believe that you have to be here, right?
Yeah,
Half the battle is showing up.
Absolutely.
Okay, good suggestions.
As long as we're talking about this, all we need is a statement. Could be in a board communique. There was a movement afoot to allow kids who were homeschooled to take part in athletics. And there was some movement, and I'm sorry to say, but you get to be my age and you start to forget things. I'm wondering where we are at this point. I thought there was some movement toward allowing that to happen.
It's
And
not,
I'm not sure what kind of
It's not allowed by law.
I understand, but I thought there was some movement at the state ed department a couple of months ago. I think I read it in one of the NISBA publications that they were looking at it. I don't know where it is, and I'd like to understand whether or not there's any activity going on that. Not that I know of anybody, I'm just curious.
Okay. Thank you, Duncan.
And I may be able to find it myself and get you the answer. I don't know. I know I read something on it a couple of months back.
Okay, anything else? Okay, open forum.
Okay. I have one hand raised. Gina Blinas, would you like to speak at open forum?
No, sorry, that must have been a mistake.
Okay, thank you.
Is Audrey waving?
No, she's petting a cat.
Stop moving your hair, Audrey.
It's her cat.
I have no emails, nothing in chat. Anything on YouTube?
No.
Okay. All right. Wait, we've got one. Alexis Aloisi, go ahead. Alexis Aloisi, would you like to speak in open forum?
Are they allowed to unmute?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so there were several parents on the parents' website and forum that were wondering when the board did their exit interview with Principal Ward, if other administration was involved or how this whole process went, because I believe a lot of the staff and the parents were completely blindsided by it. So we were just wondering if you could give any more information on what had actually happened.
I would just say any items that are on personnel agendas, we're not allowed by law to talk about their privacy concerns. We do exit interviews, and that information is confidential too.
Okay, is that with just the board or is all administration there? Because how do you separate that if there was anything that was interpersonnel related?
Our exit interviews are with our assistant superintendent of human, who's assigned to human resources.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that was just repeatedly brought up with several of the parents who were, I guess, completely unaware about what was actually going on. So that was just asked that would be asked at tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Alexis.
Nothing?
Yeah, nothing.
No. Okay. Okay, I need a motion to adjourn to executive session. When we return, we will not be making any decisions.
Duncan and Eric?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
We will regroup
Thanks,
in a few
everybody.
minutes.